When Dr. Llewellyn examined the body, he thought the killer was right-handed. The man probably strangled Polly first, put her on the ground, and cut her throat. The police had no other clues to help them find the killer. There was also no obvious motive, such as robbery. This was a new, unknown type of murder which they could not understand. Polly Nichols was not the first unfortunate who was murdered. That year, to Scotland Yard chiefs sent their most experienced officer to investigate. This was Inspector Evelyn, a fine detective who knew the East End and its people very well. But he did not know that this killer was different, clever, efficient, and savage. Today he is probably the most famous killer in the world, Jack the Ripper. But nobody has ever discovered his true identity. On August 31st, the Star newspaper had a sensational headline: "A revolting murder, another woman found horribly mutilated in Whitechapel, ghastly crimes by a maniac." Murder in the Light of Day, Chapter 2. Hanbury Street is a long street that goes from Commercial Street to Baker's Row, not far from Bucks Row. Now demolished, number 29 was an old building with 3 floors. On the ground floor, Mr. Hardiman had a cat meat shop. On the first floor, Mr. Richardson and her grandson lived in 3 rooms, and she let out the other rooms. She also had a packing case business in the cellar at the back of the house. Her son John helped her in the business, but he did not live in Hanbury Street. A carman, John Davis, occupied the attic at the front with his wife and 3 sons. A total of 17 poor people lived in number 29, which was a crowded, busy place. From Hanbury Street, people entered the house throughout a door next to Mr. Hardiman's shop. The door opened to a passage about 7-8 meters long. At the end of the passage there was a door to the backyard. This was where Jack the Ripper murdered another woman in the early hours of September 18th. It was about 4:45 a.m. when John Richardson arrived at number 29. On his way to work at Spitalfields Market, he often checked the passage because strangers sometimes came in. This morning, he also wanted to check the cellar door at the back. Some time before, thieves broke the lock and stole things. John walked throughout the passage and opened the door to the yard. Then he sat on some stone steps and took off one of his boots, which was hurting his toe. He cut a piece of leather from the boot with a knife. It was getting light, and he could see that the lock on the cellar door was secure. There was nobody in the yard. John left the house and went to the market. Albert Kadosh, a carpenter, lived at 27 Hanbury Street, next to number 29. He got up at 5:14 a.m., and in a few minutes he went out to the backyard. He was returning to the house when he heard a voice in the next yard say, "No!" 3 or 4 minutes later, Albert came into the yard again and heard a sound like a bump against the wooden fence that separated the yard of number 27 and 29. He thought it was somebody falling against the fence, but he did not look to see what it was. Then he left for work and passed Spitalfields Church at about 5:32 a.m. At 5:45 a.m., John Davis got up. By 6 o'clock he was ready for work and went downstairs to the backyard. From the top of the steps he saw a horrible sight. On his left, between the steps and the wooden fence, lay the mutilated body of a woman. Davis ran out into Hambury Street, where he saw some workmen, and shouted, "Man, come here!" They followed him, looked at the body from the steps, then ran to find a policeman. Inspector Joseph Chandler was on duty in Commercial Street at 7:10 a.m. when some workmen rushed towards him and told him about the dead woman. Chandler arrived at 29 and noted down that the woman was lying on her back with a deep cut from left to right across her throat and mutilated to her stomach. The inspector saw a piece of muslin, a cotton material, and 2 small combs that the murderer had put near her feet. The killer also took some rings from her finger. The victim was 152 meters tall. She had dark brown hair and blue eyes. 2 lower front teeth were missing. Her clothes were all old and dirty. A long black jacket down to her knees, petticoats, stockings, a black skirt, and boots. Who was she? An enchantment, or dark ending to her friends, was 47 years old. Her history told a sad story. Once she had children, but one died and another was disabled. Annie drank a lot and her marriage broke down. The small sum of money which she received from her husband stopped when he died in 1886. Annie worked when possible, selling flowers or making clothes. Sometimes she borrowed money from her relatives. But her taste for alcohol dominated her life, and eventually she had to walk the streets as a prostitute. Let us follow Annie's movements before the night of her murder. She lived in a lodging house and paid 8 pennies a night, but the week before her murder she was not at the lodging house. She had a fight with a woman about a piece of soap and got a black eye. When she met her friend Amelia Palmer on September 2nd and 3rd, she showed her the black eye and a bruise on her face. The next day, she told Amelia she did not feel well. She looked pale, so Amelia gave her 2 pennies to buy something to eat. "Don't spend it on room," she told Annie. Amelia saw Annie for the last time on the 7th. "I must get some money or I can't sleep in my lodgings," Annie said. At about 1:13 a.m. on September 18th, Annie was in the kitchen of her lodging house, eating potatoes and talking with the other loggers. She told the deputy that she did not have any money, but asked him to keep her bed because she wanted to return with the money. She left at about 1:15. Nobody saw her alive again. She never came back for her bed. 2 people were important witnesses in the murder case. One, Albert Kadosh, heard a voice in the yard and a sound like that of somebody falling against the fence between 5:20 to 5:13 a.m. The other, Elizabeth Darrell, said that as she was walking down Hambury Street at about 5:13 a.m., on her way to Spitalfields Market, she noticed a man and a woman talking outside number 29. She only saw the man's back, but she identified the woman as Annie Champman later in the mortuary. Mr. Darrell heard the man say, "We you?" and the woman replied, "Yes." Mr. Darrell could not describe the man very well. He had a dark complexion and was only a little taller than Annie. He wore a brown deerstalker hat and a dark coat. She had the impression he was over 40, perhaps 40. We know that witnesses often make small errors hours in time, so the man, Mr. Daraso, was very probably the murderer, and he attacked Annie at approximately 5:13 a.m. On the morning the sun rose at 5:23. Spitalfields Market opened at 5. It was a busy morning with a lot of people already in the streets or getting up and heavy traffic for the market. 5 people in number 29 could see the murder scene from their windows. This time Jack the Ripper was in a dangerous situation. But again, nobody saw or heard him when he killed Annie in the light of a busy day. And he escaped throughout the street like a phantom.